Welcome, everyone, to the Average Intelligence Podcast. It is another solo special, which I now realize I forgot to put in the title. So, bad Jake. But we will get started right now. This podcast is brought to you by Stevie Wicks Cool Beans Candle Company. More on them later. We're going to jump right in because, as the description says, with Avatar 2 now in theaters, also the microphone was super far away. Sorry about that. Should sound a little bit better now. With Avatar 2 now in theaters, I know it got me thinking about the first one, and it seems to be the only thing that's gotten the general public to start thinking about Avatar again, because let's be real here, after it had been out for about a year or two, I want to say I remember them talking about potential sequels, but I honestly can't remember because the movie came out in 2009. It's been over 10 years. Anyway. So yeah, I was probably just as surprised as everybody else when I started seeing news about Avatar 2. I don't know. I guess just in my mind, I kind of thought that the ship sailed and James Cameron, among pretty much everybody else, was kind of like, I guess it's not going to be a thing anymore. In fact, an article I had read for researching for a night had stated that, it probably could have had a larger cultural impact, but there wasn't. I mean, obviously, there weren't any sequels in a timely fashion within like 2 to 5 years, which I think would have been the max. If you look at franchises like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, the like, even Star Trek to a certain extent. Not really any merchandising to speak of. Like, I'm sure there were toys for like the kids and whatnot. I'm sure there were toys made back in the day, but I'll be honest, I don't remember. So if you are aware of that or know there were or weren't, so let me know in the comments because I honestly don't know. I considered actually going and seeing Avatar 2 today, but I decided not to because I did kind of tease in the short that we did. I did kind of tease that we'd be talking about the first Avatar. And plus, I kind of want to bounce off somebody for the Avatar 2 review because apparently I have the reputation of being an asshole when it comes to movie reviews. But so my first thoughts about the first Avatar movie was, and I said this when it came out, as much as I liked the movie overall, but I did see some problems because I kept calling it Dances with Wolves in Space, and it is, or like The Last Samurai in Space, or Fern Gully in Space. What it really is, it's a combination of Dances with Wolves, The Last Samurai, Fern Gully, is just in space. That's it. Because it's got the aspect of Dances with Wolves where an outside savior comes in and literally, like, I don't want to call it a white savior movie, but Dances with Wolves is a white savior movie. So it has that. It's got the training aspect, which I guess Dances with Wolves has some of that, but The Last Samurai has more of it, of the learning of the culture in terms of like their way of life, is in particular the martial arts and just the practices of the warrior culture. And then Fern Gully has the aspect of him literally becoming one of them, because if you recall in Fern Gully, the Zack character shrank down to fairy size and basically becomes a fairy without wings, So they know he's not a fairy, but he's now literally in their world as one of them and gets to see it through their eyes in a more exclusive way. So I guess you can give Avatar some points for originality insofar as it mixes all these elements together in it's a fairly cohesive story, if not simplistic. But mostly what I noticed when I rewatched Avatar is how uninterested I was. And I'm now convinced that the first Avatar movie was basically like 80% spectacle, 10% story, and another 10% of just cliches that have like boxes that have to be checked. And I guess I made a list of kind of my gripes with it, and I guess I'll just go through that now. And again, if anybody is watching and wants to add their 2 cents, I have the comment window open, so let me have it. I'd love to have a conversation. about it. But so we'll get started, and this is in chronological order. So I guess spoiler warning for a movie that came out in 2009. Yeah, basically, if you haven't seen it, you're probably not going to see the second one anyway, so won't ruin it for you. We start off the movie with Jake Sully being introduced as a paraplegic Marine who talks about waking up in a VA hospital. Now, I will admit to not being an expert on this, but I'm of the understanding they establish in Avatar that his legs can be fixed. And yet the VA did not do that. So I'm guessing this is a case of like the VA only covers so much, but I'm thinking if this was a battlefield injury, and they can do it, why does he not have the use of his legs? Did they just give him a wheelchair and we're like, hey, buddy, here you go. The movie needs you to be a paraplegic so that when you get new legs, you're like excited about it. And it gives that much more of a reason to be excited, which is ironic because he ends up being most excited about flying, where he doesn't need his legs. So the movie doesn't really explain why he's still a paraplegic, even though like they come out and say twice in the movie, who's his name? The Captain Badass. Quaritch. Quaritch says in the very beginning that he can get him his legs, and then later in the movie says it's a done deal. We just have to fly you back. So a little confused as to the wheelchair, but and it doesn't really imperil him that much either. Like they don't use it as a story crutch except when they're trying to escape in the ship later, and because it takes them so long to put the wheelchair in, which kind of begs the question why they didn't have Jake go with the pilot first, since they obviously weren't looking at video surveillance, but that's later. Alrighty, let's see what else I have here. One thing I did like about Avatar, though, and there are many things I liked about Avatar, but one of the first things I liked was they established that when these people are going to Pandora, they have to be put in basically sleep stasis. I don't remember exactly what they call it. They're put in stasis because it's a long trip. And it's kind of it's a big storytelling crutch in science fiction where, faster than light travel, which, I mean, Star Trek kind of does this right because it's not like they're there instantly, but they don't even touch on the aspects of relativity that transwarp or faster than light travel speed, the implications of that. So I like the fact that in Avatar, I think they say, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they say it's a 15-year trip or a 5-year trip or something like that. But they establish that it's a long trip, and these people are put in stasis for the duration of the trip. Because if you were to go faster in light travel, you travel faster in light, you actually end up going back in time. So you arrive at the planet before you left, and it's a whole thing, and it's very confusing. And Interstellar does a pretty good job of kind of illustrating this, but I guess they didn't even get that perfectly right because there's a lot of theory still involved in this, but they get it as right as Hollywood has ever gotten it before. It's very confusing, but they don't have to deal with that in Avatar because they established that they put them to sleep, put them on a ship, and then they wake them up when they get to Pandora. So I did like that. Another thing I liked, and this is a fun fact that I only recently learned of because it's a very small detail, but it's really cool. In Avatar, if you pay attention, the real Na'vi people have 3 fingers, whereas all the avatars have 5. I guess it's in story, I guess it's a leftover from their human DNA. So that was a fun fact that I learned. So this is where we get more into the Dances with Wolves parallels. They establish that the Avatar program exists to win the hearts and minds of the natives. Now, one thing that Avatar kind of does well, but doesn't really, is they establish that it's not a planet, it's a moon, but I'm going to use the word planet just so it's not confusing. The entire planet has Na'vi on it, but the Na'vi that they're dealing with are the Omaticaya. So they're basically dealing with one tribe. Which, when you think about it for more than 2 seconds, is very stupid. And we'll get to why here in a second. But so they're winning the hearts and minds of the natives. So they set up a school at some point because they established this in a photo with Grace and Natiri, who just so happens to be in there, which I guess kind of makes sense considering she is the chief's daughter or whatever. And Neytiri has to speak English so she can communicate with Jake because he begins the movie not speaking any Na'vi. You know, I don't know if they've ever studied American history, or really history for that matter. I mean, the people, not the filmmakers. I don't know that you've ever won the hearts and minds of the native populations by setting up a school, teaching them English and the ways of the, I'm not going to say conquerors, but they kind of are. Grace and them are the scientists that just want to learn about the Na'vi, but they can't be so naive as to not know what's going on. And I just realized that I've been using a crappy computer mic up to this point, so let me remedy that. Maybe. Huh. Well, that's weird. Am I even streaming? There it is. That's weird. Am I even streaming? There it is. Okay. I guess this microphone isn't going to work after all. Probably because I've already started. Hang on, folks. Sit tight. I think someone's knocking at my door. I will be right back. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Sorry. I hope you just fast forwarded. There's my other audio. Sweet. Other audio. Sweet. Okay, that should sound better. Sorry about that. There's a homeless guy who hangs around kind of my general area. He popped by. Actually raked my leaves for me. I told him he didn't have to do that. But nice guy. Told him I had to run though, but he's doing good. Anyway, back where we were talking on Avatar, and for those of you who just joined, I apologize for that. He just kept on knocking and wouldn't stop knocking. So anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, winning the hearts and minds of the Na'vi. So I mean, they're already not off to a great start, and they don't really establish what happened that made relations fall away. So yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And now we go to probably my biggest problem with this movie. Unobtainium. They spent millions of dollars coming up with, it's not a fake language. They made a real language. They invented a real language for the Na'vi, coming up with all these animals and fauna, tons of research. They even, the YouTube channel Sideways has a great video on this where they tried to, try to come up with a completely new way of creating music, only to have it be scrapped because it didn't really work. But tons of money, millions and millions of dollars on research for this movie. And the best they could come up with for the MacGuffin rock was unobtainium. I mean, you might as well have called it MacGuffin rocks, because that's exactly what it is. All that development, and you couldn't come up with something better than unobtainium, which in and of itself is kind of like, it's my understanding that unobtainium is an engineering joke for something that could solve a common problem, but is super rare. So it's not even original. But like, I don't know, Pandorium? Or since they have some like Greek-themed names, including Pandora, Prometheum? Or Prometheus? Which would even tie in. I don't understand why you went with unobtainium. That is so on the nose. Not to mention the cringeworthy, obvious exposition of the entire movie, but unobtainium in and of itself. And then the other thing, it's so rare and valuable, yet there's an entire planet worth of it. Which, I know it's a moon, but you know what I mean. That's why they're there. And the dumbass who's in charge of the whole operation keeps a piece of it on his desk. Now, here's the thing. You might say, Jake, it's a small piece. Who cares? Except that he says it's $20 million per kilogram. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the metric system, I know the conversion's off a smidge, but a kilogram's about I think it's actually like 2.25 pounds. That piece right there probably weighs about a pound, if I had to guess. So, at best, he's got $10 million sitting on his desk. Sell that shit. Why is he allowed to even keep that? I don't know. But the movie, I guess the movie has to show us what it looks like. I mean, there's so many ways they could have done this better. I would say it's lazy writing, but, well, no, it's just lazy writing. And what I love is they're not even explaining this to Jake when they're giving the exposition. Because Jake is supposed to be pun intended, Jake is supposed to be the avatar for the audience. Because he's coming into it not knowing anything, except the guy in charge of the whole operation is explaining it to the lead scientist who knows exactly why they're there, knows exactly what unobtainium is, and knows more about the Na'vi than the guy who's heading up the whole fucking operation. It doesn't make sense. It would have made complete sense for him to be saying this to Jake, which actually probably would have been a better scene, actually. But anyway, another big beef I have with the movie in general is that so much of the movie is stuff happening because the script needs it to happen. And no other reason at all. Oop. I hit a button. For those of you just joining us, we're complaining about Avatar, and if you saw that brief moment, well, not brief, too long of a moment where I had to leave the camera, I apologize about that. But going back to, like, for example, here's a great example of the movie being about, oh, we need this to happen in the story, so it's just going to happen. When Jake first wakes up in his Avatar body, he opens that door and then goes outside. Why is a medical examination room right next to an exterior door? That makes no sense at all. That's just so... But the script needs him to go outside. To have that really weird moment with Grace where she throws him the fruit and everybody's all happy and smiling. Plus, who are the two avatars that are playing basketball? It's not Grace because she comes up later and throws Jake the fruit. And it's not Norm because he was in the medical room with Jake. Yet these are the only avatars that were shown in the field. Who the fuck are these two playing basketball? Where are they? Why do they even need Jake? They've apparently got a bunch of these people running around. It's not like they're short-handed, or at least they don't. They say they're short-handed, but then you see other avatars. And then in the trailer for the second one, they show more avatars walking around on the human side. That also doesn't make sense with Grace, because she throws him the fruit, and up to that point, she's like, we don't need you, I don't want you. And then she's like, here, catch. Isn't this great? And then she goes right back to being a bitch to him. Then we come to the problem of the cliche of pretty much any native culture ever shown in a movie, where why are they all in touch with nature? Like, all of them. As though no native population has ever delighted in the killing of animals. Keep in mind, many of them have animal sacrifices. Human sacrifices, even. You're telling me that there's never been an indigenous native population ever on planet Earth, much less in the galaxy, that delights in the killing of living creatures? And make no mistake, the Ometekai are known as hunters. Now, I get the whole thing. Like, I'm not anti-hunter. I get the aspect of it where, you know, it's like, and they have that ritual thing where when they hunt something, they kill it and they put it out of its misery and they give thanks, blah, blah, blah. But the scene in particular is Neytiri happens upon Jake and wastes so many of those, like, weird cat, dog things, and then gets mad at him when I don't think he killed a single one. He might have killed one. I'm trying to remember. And Neytiri gets mad at him when she's like just like beating the crap out of him and wasting him left and right. And she's mad at him because of something that wasn't even his fault. Because he got separated from his group after being attacked, funnily enough, by those wild animals. So Jake is trying to run away. It's not like he walked up to the animal, slapped it across the face, and said, "Fight me, bitch," you know? It just, But they have to establish that, you know, like, Jake bad and Navi good. And sadly, it works. And then I had another note here. Quaritch, I don't remember the actor's name. Quaritch is much better as a good guy because he's basically playing the same character in a show, heavily underrated show that aired on Fox shortly after Avatar came out. I want to say it aired in 2010, called Terra Nova. Only one season. But the same actor plays the good guy, though. It's one of the better parts of the show. Liked it a lot. And then another thing that annoyed me about the movie. Well, let's see. What are some other times where, you know, plot needs it so it happens? I'm sure I'll think of. Oh, well, like for one, Eywa being like Jake is the chosen one. As a critical drinker would say, "Wow, that was lucky." And for that matter, Jake's brother dying. The whole movie wouldn't have happened had not happened. But I guess you could chalk that one up to, you know, we only recognize it as a coincidence because it happened. If it hadn't happened, we wouldn't say it was anything because it wouldn't have happened. But then we have the floating mountains of Pandora, which I didn't notice this the first time I saw it, but literally, it wouldn't bother me because I understand there must be some kind of weird gravity flux happening there, except that we see waterfalls. The falling of water off of a mountain that is floating in the air. How? How does that work? And for that matter, where does the water go? Does it just keep falling? Does it do a weird evaporation thing where it comes back up? Where's the water? It would have to do some weird evaporation thing because it's a floating fucking mountain. If gravity was that messed up and the water fell off, but there's no way for the water to get back, there wouldn't be waterfalls. Does it fall off one of the other mountains? Eventually it would run out unless there's some weird looped up self-contained water cycle. It just doesn't make sense, and this is why I ruin movies, because I see stuff like that And it just, I don't understand how it works. Don't understand how it works. And then I spend way too long trying to figure it out. And I never do because it doesn't make sense because it's impossible. Gravity. Although apparently there is no gravity. But then how can you stand on one of the floating mountains? I guess it's differing gravity, but anyway, just doesn't make sense. So then we move on to the Ikran, which are the weird, the dragon thingies that they ride. Actually, a pretty cool concept. I actually like that. It's one of the more memorable parts in the movie. But they're another example of something that seems to only exist because, like, halfway through the movie, they realize, oh, we need them to fly at some point. We need them to be able to fly at some point, so we have to introduce alien dragons so that they can fly. Which is fine, though. They do make a really big deal out of it. Like, this is a personal thing for me, but I think the whole, like, Ikran training sequence just takes way too long. And I love, like, this is not a big deal, but it stuck out to me. I love how after Jake gets his, Neytiri's been doing this for years. They established that. And yet they're at one point they're in a tree talking about how they were flying, but they were both there, and it's not new to Neytiri. I don't know. It seems like a weird thing. But then there's some problems with the Ikran because they establish, or I should say Neytiri establishes that once a Na'vi bonds with one of the Ikran, that Ikran will not bond with another Na'vi for the rest of its life. So there's two ways this information turns Jake into a real dick. I'll get into that in a second, but this kind of makes me wonder. It made me wonder, though, which again, the first time I watched the movie, I didn't even think about this. But upon the second viewing, or I should say a later viewing, because I'd seen it more than once. But when I watched it recently, I thought, wait a minute, wait. So once they put their hair thing into its ear thing, it just completely changes the brain chemistry of the animal. Like, I don't know about you, but that's getting into... That's some weird kind of mind control shit. And I don't know how well that sits with me. Considering that the movie goes out of its way to basically suggest that the Na'vi are like this super righteous people. Yet they're enslaving these dragon things, which are free until the day a Na'vi jumps on its back and connects its junk to its ear hole. But now on to why Jake is a dick. So as previously established, the Ikran pair for life. Jake, knowing full well that he is not going to stay, or at least he wasn't supposed to stay. He does end up staying on Pandora, but he wasn't going to. That was never part of the permanent plan. Proceeds to bond with one of these animals, knowing full well that he is going to leave. So this animal who, if it isn't full mind control, is a potential part of this animal's life cycle. So Jake's just going to up and leave. And not only does he do this, now at this point, Jake probably realizes he's going to stay with the Na'vi, but he has already paired with one of these animals. But then he goes and gets another one because it's bigger, faster, rarer, and a more vibrant color. Kind of like a guy trading in his Chevy for a Ferrari. Except he doesn't put his brain stem into the car's exhaust port before he does it. But then not only does he do that, knowing full well, because this is established when he first meets the Ometekai and he meets the chief and the spiritual leader, whatever her actual title is. Neytiri explains that they are a mated pair and that Na'vi mate for life. He proceeds to mate with Neytiri, not knowing he's going to stay on Pandora. Now, he might want to, but at that point in the movie, he doesn't know that he's going to stay. He thinks he's going to go through the ceremony. Maybe he intends to, but he knows that he can't guarantee that, so he does it anyway. And shame on Neytiri, too, because she doesn't bring it up again until after they've boned. And then she reminds him in a way like I just imagine Jake waking up from his avatar and then like grabbing all of his shit and leaving the apartment because she's like, we are mated now, Jake. Like we are together for life. I just pictured him just like casually picking up his loincloth and trying to sneak out before she wakes up. The other really stupid thing, well, one of the many stupid things that happens in this movie is when they have that gotcha moment when they reveal that they have Jake's logs. And it's like, oh, this is how we knew what was going on. It was never a secret. His logs were always accessible. They went out of their way to make sure that that was known because it's, quote, all part of the science. Don't you think that's one of the first things you would shut down or at least falsify once you realize that you were going against the grain of the corporation that hired you to do all the sciencey stuff? And then, so in that same scene, we go to war. We would go from literally zero to war in like 60 seconds. Jake is supposed to infiltrate the people. That was the mission, quote unquote. And then explain to them what they were trying to do and that the largest deposit of said thing was under the tree, which I'm going to touch on that again here in a second because I mentioned that at the beginning. And then try to negotiate. Jake had only just been accepted into the Ometakaya. He's only just now in a position to talk to them in this way. Before then, he was an outsider. He was not part of the group. But for some reason, they decide because of it's the end of the line for their arbitrary 3-month period to go, oh, well, he failed. Even though he didn't fail, he did exactly what he was supposed to do in terms of the whole plan. And they're like, nah, we're just going to blow them all up now. Again, because the script needs them to do that. Doesn't have to make sense. And speaking of going from zero to war in 60 seconds, oh God, what's her name? Trudy. When they're attacking Home Tree, she's the only one who doesn't fire and actually leaves the battlefield. And yet later, she's free to roam around into the prison cell, holding the people that she's obviously on their side. How was she not fired, court-martialed, arrested for disobeying direct orders from her superiors? Again, the script needs her to be able to bail them out. Now, a quick fix for this would have been her lying and saying, oh, I have a weapons malfunction. Okay, going to return to base to get it looked at. That's all you had to do. And then it would have made sense. Now, granted, she doesn't get to have the obvious moral high ground then, but I think maybe a little nitpicky, but still. Then it would have been more a surprise. It would have been more of a surprise when she came to help them, which when she walked in the room, nobody was shocked. Except the people in the scene having to act shocked. Why were they shocked? So after all that, they escape. Grace gets shot. In the time it takes, oh man, it takes them so long to get Grace any help. No wonder she dies. But so Jake's solution to his betrayal of the Na'vi people, the Ometakaya, is to jump on a bigger, shinier, more magical dragon, and everything's suddenly okay, including with is his name Suite? The guy who's never liked Jake, ever, is now totally cool because he's got the bestest, baddest dragon around now. I don't know. It's weird. And I love that he's like, will you ride with me, brother? It's like, brother, we don't even like each other up until like 2 seconds ago. Which leads us into the cliche final battle, which is so dumb. It's not dumb that they have a final battle, but first of all, this battle should never have taken place. Because let's think about this. They establish that the largest unobtainium deposit earlier in the movie they established is underneath the Home Tree, not the Sacred Tree, the Tree of Souls or whatever. I'm probably getting franchises mixed up. It's under Home Tree. they blew the shit out of Home Tree. The Na'vi are no longer at Home Tree. You don't need to go after them. You don't. Just set up a perimeter around Home Tree in a place where your radar and other instruments work. And if the Na'vi try to attack you, then you can fight them off. But you don't need to go after them. But for some reason, Quaritch gets a hate boner for the Na'vi and is like, nope, we're going to waste them all, even though there's a planet full of them. So even if he has a personal vendetta against the Omaticaya, now is not the time. Now is to set up your mining operation. So this is wholly unnecessary from the human side. And, okay, so maybe the Na'vi decide they want to strike back, but after the ass-kicking they took with the superior weaponry and the element of surprise even, I don't know that they'd really be itching for a fight that soon afterward. The only reason they do start to fight is because they find out that the humans are planning to strike the Tree of Souls. Now, I understand why they would want to defend that, but the way they go about doing it is quite strange, because in order to get to the Tree of Souls, the humans have to get close for them to have any sort of chance, because they need to be in the floating mountains of Pandora, where you have the Flux MacGuffin force field where the instruments don't work. And even with all of that, they end up with superior numbers because they ride around intelligently, mind you. They ride around to other Na'vi clans and ask for help, and it's implied that they all agree to help. Even though I have a hard time believing that every clan would be like, yes, let's commit our fighting men and women to your cause, even though this has nothing to do with us. I have a hard time believing that every single tribe or clan would agree to that. But the strategy they employ, so the humans have superior technology. Now, granted, they take some of that away because they can't use their instruments. The air especially, that's guerrilla warfare all day long. That's hit and run tactics. That's sending a strike force to infiltrate the command ship to get some Na'vi inside there. Or Jake's got those grenades, just blow it out of the sky. That's the one you really need to get out of the sky. The rest of the time, you can literally just hit and run and harass. Now, on the ground, which why there are ground forces anyway, I'm not really sure. It is literally a case of the humans are in a line, and then the Na'vi on horseback are in a line, and they run at them while shouting. Not from the flanks, not from behind, letting the humans go past and lying in wait. No, they just run at them. Like, I'm even watching this. It's not even epic in scope. It would be one thing if this were like a Last Stand, where the Na'vi have a perimeter set up around the tree, but that's not really what they're doing. It's just like, it's every movie battle cliche we can think of, and then they wonder why they get annihilated. It's like, well, if you took people with spears, bows and arrows, and rocks maybe, and ran directly at a wall of machine guns, I wonder what would happen. You don't have to think about it very long, because it wouldn't last very long. They found that out at the beginning of the First World War. This is well established. And then thank goodness we have the Deus Ex Pandora? Deus Ex Pandora, because the planet decides, conveniently at the last minute, mind you, not beforehand when it could have saved the lives of many, many Na'vi. The planet decides to finally fight back with all the plants and animals rising up against the human threat and still barely winning. And then they kick them off Pandora as though the humans are never, ever going to come back again. Because if there's anything we know about people, it's that we give up super easily when it comes to things like that. So yeah, that's really all I can think of on short notice. I mean, there's other things. Mainly how the character of Jake Sully is largely unlikable. Like, you're supposed to root for him, which I think is why they made him a paraplegic, but he's unlikable. Because when he starts the movie, he's just a smug know-it-all, and then he's an idiot, and then he becomes self-righteous all in the same movie. So he goes through he has three states of being in the movie, and they all convert from one another, and he's never likable in any method. And they just kind of gloss over where he's, albeit maybe unintentionally, a jerk, but still a jerk. Namely, like mating with Neytiri, even though he knows that they mate for life, and once they do that, they're a mated pair. I mean, I'm sure the Na'vi have some sort of equivalent to divorce, because I mean, like, what if her mate had died or something like that? I don't know. But then, do they mate for life? Well, I guess that would be mating for life, wouldn't it? Yeah. So they probably have some sort of, thing for that. I will say the scene where they do this right, and I mean this in a good way. When Neytiri saves Jake and then she sees his human form, they have this really interesting, and I want to stress again, it was extremely well done, but it's an interesting juxtaposition that makes it different. So I'll give some points for originality here, because Neytiri is a 10-foot tall blue alien chick, and Jake Sully in his real human form is probably like a 5'10", 5'11", if he's standing, which he can't do, huh? Paraplegic human guy. So he's significantly smaller. And yet Neytiri looks at him and obviously knows who he is, but still has that love for him that had been established. So that was an interesting and very cool way to do it. So that I did like. And then let's not take anything from away, and which I think this was kind of the point of the entire movie, is Avatar is, and still is, mind you, just a whole new level of filmmaking. It looks beautiful. A lot of the movie is, and I get it, a lot of the movie is showing off the visual effects prowess, which is top notch. Kudos. Still holds up to this day. I watched it on my giant ass TV, and it still looks phenomenal. Which is one of the reasons why I do want to see the second one. Although I'm worried about the second one because as much as the first one was spectacle, I'm afraid they're going to do the same thing, because I'm given to understand that part of the delay was for them to be able to develop the technology to do the visual effects underwater. And it seems like a lot of this movie is going to take place underwater. And for those of you that have seen it, let me know in the comments. But it seems like now they're talking to whales, but the whales are actually smart. So is the second one going to be like a giant Save the Whales movie? Which, don't get me wrong, I'm all in favor of saving the whales. You know what I'm also a fan of saving? Money. And that's exactly how Stevie Wicks can help you with your holiday gift giving. There's still a week before Christmas. You still have time to get your gifts, particularly if you're in the local Indiana area. But this is one of the many gifts you can get, the 12 Days of Christmas box set. It has a little miniature candle of every Christmas scent that they offer. $24.99. You can give this gift to a loved one, a friend. You can technically give it to somebody you don't like, but I don't know why you would. Every Christmas scent and color, as well as all the other Christmas and holiday candles, because it is Hanukkah as well, which night 2 of Hanukkah tonight. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. And Merry Christmas. And God, I hope it's a Happy New Year. But anyway, you can get all this and more at steviewicks.com, STEVIEWIX.com. And believe you me, I've looked around at pricing comps, and they are actually quite a bit more affordable for, honestly, a higher quality candle. If you buy from Stevie Wicks, you won't need to get your candles anywhere else. That's all I'm saying. And plus, they're a proud sponsor of this podcast, so we love them. Speaking of saving money, though, Avatar 2 did not do that. I had read, or actually I think Sosa said, yeah, Sosa told me. Sosa Potence 300 on YouTube, by the way. You should go check him out, too. Very entertaining stuff. He did a Black Panther Wakanda Forever review with us not that long ago, which I had a lot of fun talking to him about that. He's got some very unique but not inaccurate perspectives. Can't wait to hear his opinion on Avatar 2. But apparently this movie is going to need to make $2 billion just to break even. Whew. That is a gamble. And apparently there are going to be more sequels. Hopefully it's not a 12-year difference. Is 12 years? No, 13, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so I'm actually starting to run out of things to talk about with Avatar, other than I'm just kind of. I was hoping to have more conversation in this podcast. And don't worry, on the audio streams, you won't know what I'm talking about with that big pause because I'm gonna edit that out. But YouTube is live, so. But yeah, let us know in the comments your thoughts on Avatar, whether you thought it was good, whether you thought it was bad, whether you thought it was just okay, kind of like I did. I think the best way I can give a condensed, opinion on Avatar is essentially that, I mean, it's all right, but tremendously overrated, which is a shame because they did put a lot of money in the world building and the visual effects, which are stunning. But at the end of the day, the most important part of a movie is story, and this one just doesn't have a great one. I'd be curious to I'd be curious to for somebody to provide like a rewrite of it to make it a more engaging script. Because you have a movie like Dances with Wolves, which is a really good movie. I love Dances with Wolves. Now, granted, some of it today is kind of laughable. Like, oh yeah, he falls in love with the one white woman that's in the Native American and the Lakota tribe, because I think it was Lakota in Dances with Wolves, which is just laughable today, but back then as if it was so long ago. But you know what I mean? Like, it was different period. Except Dances with Wolves is probably more factual. And then you have The Last Samurai, which I actually give The Last Samurai a bit of a break because it is loosely based on history. Very loosely, but I mean, which is why I get kind of annoyed. I covered this in my response video to the takes, asexual Asian man, not cliche, trope on my Arte Media channel. Is they bring up The Last Samurai, and I'm like, that's probably the worst example of a movie to point out as a white savior movie because, like, yes, the character of Nathan Algren is a white man, but he is based on someone who actually existed and fought during the Satsuma Rebellion on the side of the samurai, Yul Brynner. Like, this person actually existed, and they lost hard, just like they did in The Last Samurai. But yeah, they lost real hard. Yeah, so they picked kind of the worst example when Dances with Wolves. Well, I guess they were talking about Asian men specifically. But yeah, Avatar probably is, out of the examples I gave, probably is the best example of a white savior movie, but it's fictional, so it gets less criticism for that, I suppose. Although, speaking of which, now that I mention it, believe me, not that I care, Avatar wasn't terribly diverse in its casting. Interesting. Wonder why it got a pass. I'm trying to think. Interesting. Not god awful, but not terribly well diverse. Not that I care. Or at least that you could see, because yeah, okay, I guess it was fairly diverse. I mean, half the cast was blue. Alrighty, and then on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I know this wasn't a particularly good episode, but it was kind of thrown together at the last minute. But the good news is, it was short. Like I wish Avatar had been. I seriously think you could have cut a solid hour out of that movie and it would have been fine. But anyway, hopefully Avatar 2, The Way of Water, is better than the first one. I did read a plot synopsis and it wasn't quite as goofy as I thought, but I have a feeling it's going to be unnecessarily complicated and have a lot of wasted time and probably too many characters. But we shall see. And believe you me, if it's a bad movie, I will take great joy in tearing it apart. And if it's a good movie, I will have great joy singing its praises. But like always, I try to be firm but fair. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Average Intelligence Podcast. I really hope you did, because it was kind of thrown together. But if you did, let us know. And if you didn't, let us know why. And as always, like, share, and subscribe. And if you prefer to listen to the podcast rather than watch it, you can check us out on all of our audio streaming platforms, including but not limited to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor.fm, Audible, Amazon, Pocket Casts, iHeartRadio, and many, many more. This has been the Average Intelligence Podcast. Thank you for watching.